I'm sure it'd end up a lot better.
Order. That concludes questions for oral answer. Would some honourable member care to move that the House takes note of miscellaneous business? Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, there's only one question that New Zealanders are asking after the first few weeks of this political year, and that is, when will the half-truths, the double-speak, the dissembling, the obfuscation, when will it come to an end? Because if there's one thing that this government has mastered, is they cannot tell it straight. From the Prime Minister to the Minister for Economic Development to the Finance Minister, they cannot tell a straight story to New Zealand. They have to dress it up, they have plenty to hide, they have plenty to conceal, and they've had plenty of opportunity to do so. But, Mr Speaker, it's all coming to an end. It's all coming to an end, and it was very interesting hearing the Minister for Construction of Casinos and Hotels just now talking about the Sky City deal, because there is another example, just another example, that when the government had the chance to tell New Zealanders the full truth, when they had the chance to be upfront and straight up with New Zealanders, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. So when they knew 15 months ago that they didn't have the money right, that they might be ponied up for a little bit more money because the poor old gambling company Sky City couldn't afford it, couldn't afford to make their promise, the government didn't say a thing about it. And they continued to promise John Key and Stephen Joyce we would have a free convention centre. And then they started the softening up act. They won the election, they thought that's it, we're quids in here, brothers, we'll soften them up, they'll have no objection, we'll tell them another $140 million. What am I bid? They said. What am I bid? And they tried to soften us up, but it didn't work. And the people of New Zealand said, no, a promise is a promise. And when John Key, the great helmsman, says he makes a promise, he should stick with it. It's an unusual occurrence, actually, for most New Zealanders to see the Prime Minister make a promise and stick to it. But on this score, on this time, at this occasion, they said, no, he made the promise, he must stick to it. And so they were forced to back down. Of course, it wasn't the Prime Minister who, having made the promise, who had to perform the somersault. That was left to the very agile and nubile Stephen Joyce to do that, who had to perform the U-turn. And then we have Dong Hua Lu. Then we have Dong Hua Lu's story. This is a never-ending story. And they thought before the election, they thought they had it all sewn up. Their little mate, who wrote out a cheque for $25,000 and personally handed it to Jamie Lee Ross, who put it in his bank account and had it sitting there earning interest at sky-high rates that the government keeps telling us about. They wrote him out the cheque, Dong Hua Lu. They thought they had it all over us because it was, the poor old Labour Party, look, you wrote a letter, you had this. We had the allegation of a $100,000 bottle of wine. Nobody heard of the bottle of wine. The affidavit they claimed had been sworn was nowhere to be seen. The written statement that followed the affidavit was nowhere to be seen. The kind of thing on the napkin paper that they talked about, that couldn't be found either. And it all turned out to be just a load of old codswallop. But what wasn't codswallop was the cosy relationship between the Prime Minister, John Key, and Dong Hua Lu, the man now facing court charges. Oh yes. And it wasn't the mythical $100,000 bottle of wine, it was the very real $25,000 cheque that found its way into the bank account of Jamie Lee Ross. But they wouldn't front up and tell us the truth at the time. Then there's state housing. They are very important state houses that so many New Zealanders are dependent on because they can't afford to buy their own, they can't afford to live in the private rental market. Was there one word spoken during last year's election campaign where they promised they would sell off the state houses? No way. And they wouldn't front up about that. And now we have the deployment of troops to Iraq. Did they ever tell us that 16 personnel would be sent up there for training, with 106 sent to provide security? Did they ever tell us that they would be within spitting distance of the front line of Islamic State? They wouldn't tell us that either. They cannot tell the story straight. They cannot tell the story straight, and now they can't be straight about how long they will be there, because this is not a job that will take 2 years. This is a long-term job dealing with one of the most evil organisations in the world, and we have a Prime Minister who cannot be straight with New Zealanders about exactly what they're committing good New Zealand troops to. And they won't tell us everything. They won't tell us what the facts are. They'll stand up here in the comfort of their leather armchair and accuse others of not having courage, but they don't have the courage to front up to New Zealanders.
Order.
Point of order, the Honourable Jerry Bradley.
Mr. Speaker.